What if I told you that the people that were telling you to take up space were giving you bad advice? That's what we're unpacking today on Gaining Ground from Black Ram Media Group. My name is Daniela Beasant. I'm a strategist and creative director at Black Ram Media Group. So part of what I do at Black Ram is working with executives that are looking to fast track their promotions to a higher executive level, perhaps, or at the board level, or are looking to get into politics. And my job is to make sure that they are prepared for success and that they're set up to be successful. And part of that is to look at their flaws and maybe areas where they're overcompensating in some ways so they can polish themselves up, get their ego in check, get their confidence level, true confidence and not arrogance, get true confidence up so that, they can achieve all of their goals. And let's face it, none of us are getting into adulthood unscathed, right? So even if you are usually a very self-aware person, you could be coming into your professional life with a little bit of baggage, even from your childhood, that will make you view things in a way that may not be helpful to you. It may have been an armor that you used, a defense mechanism, to help you move forward. Right at the time it served you, but now as an adult and in a professional capacity, these things that once armored you can actually be a detriment to you and could push people away from you. And one of the things that people do is get bad advice, like take up space, and forget the second half of the sentence that should have been with things of value. So then what ends up happening is you do overcompensating sort of behavior that becomes quite annoying and obvious to people that don't have your glitch. So now instead of looking competent, you look wounded. And therefore, the chance of someone choosing you for the promotion over someone who is, more stable that way, right? Or who doesn't have, these wounds, these emotional ego wounds that they're bringing into the equation. Someone's going to say, I would rather deal with the other person because they're going to be less annoying, because nobody wants annoying. So today what I'm going to dig through for you is the concept of taking up space, where it came from, and how the bad side of it. We're going to talk about the good side first, right? Why sometimes you do need to force yourself to take up space. So we are going to talk about the good end of it, but then we're also going to cover how, when you're not applying this properly, how it could appear, the symptoms of this, so that you can catch yourself from doing this. And these are going to come up in meetings, a board meeting or a group meeting, any kind of group work that you're doing professionally. This is where these behaviors will most likely manifest. And, these group scenarios, these are where your opportunities lie. This is where you're building up your network. This is where you're finding your allies. This is where your opportunities for sales, right? So you want to be the assist in whoever's going to close that deal, and you want to make sure that you're a helpful player. You get the MVP award, and that you're not actually the stumbling block that people have to work around. And so I'm going to tell you all the different ways that you may present as a stumbling block and not even know it. So I'm giving you a lot of juicy stuff today. So first, let's talk about where take up space came from and why it was a good thing and why it was necessary. Take up space started in the modern feminist movement, and it started as advice that was being given to women that were emerging in leadership roles for the first time in corporate culture, for the first time joining boards of directors, for the first time getting to executive level management. Because there were some traits inherent in women or behaviors that were detrimental to women. And this philosophy came forward as the mantra or the antidote to this. And then it started to get appropriated by other marginalized groups that also started to make their way into these leadership roles that at one time prejudice or bias may have kept them out of. So what ends up happening is when you've been kept out of opportunities forever, and then you're finally allowed at the seat of the table, there's a few things that will creep up sometimes in people, but, often, right? So there's certain things that happen to you when you've come from that scenario of, being ostracized and being the first ones, allowed at the leadership level. And part of that is, you're just grateful to be there. So sometimes you'll set yourself up as a doormat just because you're always scared of losing that opportunity. And also because you feel responsible because the opportunity isn't just for you, but you realize that you have, you've set the trail. You're the trailblazer for a lot of people that will be able to come after you. So there's a lot of pressure when you're in that situation. And women specifically have a tendency to not take up space, right? So one of the habits that leaders and people that were helping mentor women in these leadership positions for the first time, were noticing that women had a tendency, for example, to not interject unless they were asked. So they wouldn't necessarily voluntarily offer their opinion or offer their concerns about a thing unless someone specifically sought it out. Or they wouldn't assert themselves. So if there was a bully in the room, right? Or if somebody was not really allowing them to really participate. It's bad enough I have to let you in the room, but I'm not actually letting you in the conversation. That was happening a lot. So this was created as a, listen, you've got to get a bit of a backbone here, and you're going to have to, overtalk this person, right? You're going to have to show or prove your value and force it down their throats, because in the beginning, that was a thing. And it was awkward because women didn't know how to navigate that. So the advice that was given was take up space. Don't wait for them to ask, because they're not always going to ask, right? So if you're a confident person, like these men that you're with, they're not thinking twice about offering their opinion or sharing their concerns. So why are you waiting to be asked? They're not waiting to get asked, right? And you want to be an equal player in this game. So act like an equal, take up space. That's where that came from. The problem is that people took that advice, they forgot the be of value part, and now they approach it as an entitlement. An entitlement, like I'm here and I'm going to force you to deal with me. And the days of you having to force your way in the room are gone. And yet people are still acting like they had to force their way in there, where you actually belong there. So the insecurities or that chip on your shoulder that you're bringing to the table is unnecessary and is going to make you perceive things in a way that then will have you behave in a way that's going to do the opposite of what you're trying to get accomplished. So when you're not aware of your baggage and your vulnerabilities, you're not aware of how you're coming across to people, and how sometimes you will end up nasty and defensive unnecessarily, which then makes you disagreeable and toxic. So let's look at how this shows up. Okay, these are the symptoms. So all of this is going to come down to the fact that these behaviors I'm about to identify for you are trying to prove your value. This is what you're trying to do. You'll fail. It's exactly the opposite of what you're doing. But what you're trying to do in a misguided way is to prove your worth. And these are the way that you wrongly prove your worth. Being long-winded. That's the number one thing I see. That is perceived as, wow, that person just loves the sound of their own voice. That's when you ramble on, you try to use big words or get philosophical, where you use a lot of corporate mumbo-jumbo legalese to make yourself sound smart. Or you're the type of person that has to go on and on and on, even after you've closed the deal, you're still trying to convince them. You're the guy that makes the meeting run longer than it has to, right? You ask unnecessary questions that take up time, all that stuff like that. And believe me, of all of those, the worst one is making a meeting run longer than you have to. That is the biggest no-no. They will hate you. It's not just that they won't like having you there. People will come to hate you for making a meeting that could have been done in 20 minutes last an hour because you had to ramble on and on and on, especially if it's not valuable. And this is where this comes in, is you setting a numerical quota. So instead of really listening and really being present in that meeting and listening to what other people say so that you could really maybe come up with some insightful, juicy contributions. Instead, what you're thinking is, okay, so the meeting's going to be a half hour and there's 4 of us in the room. And that means that in order for me to feel like I'm getting equal airtime, I'm going to have to take up the space of about 5 minutes. So let me think of things that I can say so that, I'm making an impression and that I sound really smart. You better hope there's something of value in what you're saying. Because if you're just speaking to take up air, and remember, when I say something of value, not what you think sounds great, not what you think is valuable. Did you just say something that's going to close the deal? Because if you're not closing, you're not closing, right? So if you're just speaking because you want to sound smart, but you're not actually telling the person something they want or need to hear to want to close whatever deal you're trying to close, right? Or trying to impress the boss, for example, you're not impressing the boss by talking a lot of hot air. He's not going to walk away thinking, wow, she spoke for 5 minutes and the man in the room only spoke 4 minutes, so she must be a minute smarter than that guy. No, that's not what he's thinking. He's thinking, wow, that person wouldn't shut up. We could have been out of there 20 minutes ago if that person wasn't asking all these stupid questions that didn't even pertain, or giving me information that didn't pertain to what I was asking, right? So you don't want to be that person. And you don't want to start comparing yourself by giving yourself minute quotas. So start judging your performance based on the juiciness of what you offer, how substantial it is, and how usable it is to the people you're sharing that communication with. Don't be just taking up space for the sake of taking up space. Another thing is when you get easily defensive. So if you propose an idea and someone says, what about this problem? Or what about that problem? And you automatically get defensive, that's a problem. Instead, it's better to take it as, that's something that's very important to think about. As a matter of fact, when I first started planning this, I dug into that issue quite deeply, and this is how I plan on circumventing it. So you're not defensive, but you are telling the other person, buddy, sit down. I already thought about this. It's not a problem, right? So you can tell someone to sit down without saying sit down and without getting defensive. As a matter of fact, you can actually make it sound like, you are deeply thinking and considering what they're thinking and their issues are. And this is what you think would help the problem. So now you're not just shoving him away. You're actually being thoughtful and you're being a good listener. Another thing is when your chip on the shoulder makes you see things that aren't there. So, for example, I remember being in a meeting once with somebody that I had been in several meetings, and one of his problems is interrupting people. So this guy interrupts everybody. It's just something he does. He cuts people off and he cuts everybody off. Everybody, doesn't matter who it is you're talking to. And in this meeting, he happened to interrupt a woman. Now, this guy was the guy in charge, okay? So he's the big boss here. And this is a woman who's trying to assert her power. And you can see that she's someone who fell under the bad advice of that women need to be tougher than a guy if they're going to be in the corporate setting. This is another piece of bad advice that warrants its own video, right? But that is when, you think that you have to be mean to every man that you're doing business with so that they don't challenge you ever, or that they don't intimidate you, and you try to be like a guy. Because that was something that women early on were told. That's what we were told in the corporate world. And that did a lot of damage too. So in this meeting, this guy interrupts her and she lost it. She lost it on him and accused him of being sexist. Say, you're sexist and you're only interrupting me because I'm a woman. Well, the thing is, this guy knows that this is a bad habit of his. So he's self-aware enough, not that it stops him, but he's self-aware enough to know that he does this. So instantly he was like, actually, no, this is a bad habit of mine, but I do this with everybody, men included, and there were enough men in the room that had been cut off by him 1,000,000 times to attest to that, including women in the room like myself that were fully aware of this behavior in him. So you basically point blank just called me a sexist when I know that I'm not, and he's not, because he's the guy that put the women in the room in this leadership board position. And he's the one that made sure it happened. So he's the least sexist person I know. So that was a bad call on your part. So, so that made us all look at her in a way. Because she was wrong. Not that this guy was right to interrupt her, but her response was wrong. And it didn't make her look stronger as a woman. It made her look like, wow, you got some baggage there, lady. Like, you got a chip on your shoulder. So, it didn't endear anybody to her. And it didn't endear her to the other women in the room because she was wrong in this instance. And the other women in the room loved this guy, whether he cuts us off or not, because he's a really great leader. And she was new, didn't know him enough to make a call like, you're a sexist. That was what, So she didn't last. Let's put it that way. She didn't last. Another instance I knew was a gentleman that played devil's advocate all the time. So his thing was, he thought that by finding the problem that nobody else in the room found, then that means that he's smarter than everybody else in the room. And, once in a while, sure. I mean, when you can do that, then you're a great risk manager. And, that's a great skill set or great intuition, to bring to business. But if that's your default operating position, just because you proved yourself smart one time, that now you're going to do that in every conversation, in every instance. And the gentleman that I knew, that's what he did. I had to fire him. So he worked a few levels down from me, and his management, who reported to me, would call me incessantly complaining, say, look, we can't get anything done. I can't tell this guy anything without him challenging me. If I say, I want you to put this on the right, yeah, but don't you think that maybe you should go on the left? Like, it didn't matter what they told him to do, what anybody's idea was, he challenged everything. And it slowed down production so much, and his managers got so sick and tired of having to convince him of every little thing, they made me fire him. They just couldn't take it anymore. So I did. And I knew somebody else on a board of directors that I served with a long time ago. And she was the same. Always had to play, devil's advocate to the point that it was toxic. And it was never in a way of so that we can find a solution. It was always why we shouldn't do a thing. And it was so negative. So it's like, you know what? I know you think you sound smart, but you don't. You don't. What you sound is annoying and negative and defeatist. So, you don't want to be that. That's not how you prove your smarts. There's better way to prove your smarts. Let me give you an example of a sales meeting that I got to attend once for someone, and the worst case of close blocking I have ever seen. So I was involved as the media rep on a sales call, and this company was trying to make a partnership agreement with another company for product development. And they've been trying to close this deal now for several meetings, a long time. I'm talking about a long time, like months. And today's the day. So today's the day that the CEO is going to make that close, right? So he's going to close this deal. So they're finally on the phone with the guy, and he has his last minute, questions and reservations, and the CEO is skating around him like a figure skater. So he's doing a great deal. And now to go to basketball, he's ready for the layup, right? So he's now, he's got the ball and he's going towards the net, and he's ready. He's ready to make that jump and do the layup and, score that goal. And all of a sudden, his coworker, every time he's about to close, his coworker interrupts with and another thing I thought, it would be great, so and so and so. So, you can't interrupt him, so you indulge his long-winded thing, because this guy is a take-up space person, and he likes to use big words and talk gobbledygook, corporate gobbledygook that means nothing. So now he does this, so then great. So now the CEO manages to get the conversation back. He's ready to make the offer, right? He's ready to do it. What does the guy do? Interrupts again. Interrupts a third time. The CEO gets the conversation again right where he needs to. He's about to do the layup. This guy again interrupts, and all of a sudden, the guy on the other end that they're selling to says, "Oh, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm out of time tonight. I'm going to have to reconvene. So let's try and talk soon. We'll keep in touch. Let's keep the conversation going." And hangs up, and they miss the opportunity. Can you imagine? Do you think that guy that was trying to be of value, and he kept trying to add, like, the CEO knew he was ready to close. He didn't need more. He was ready. The guy was juicy and ready to sign. He didn't need more. And you just kept rambling and never making the offer, which means you never can close it. You think that guy got invited to any other phone call? Never. Never. So here he is trying to attempt to show himself as something, and all he did was show himself out the door. So these are how these mistakes actually hurt you in real life. These are things I've witnessed. And another big one is when you first are new to a thing, whether you're new to a company, but most especially I'm thinking here when you're new to the board level, right? You want to show your worth right away, and I get that. It's like, when we have an election, the first 100 days, the new president or prime minister is trying to pack in as many new things as possible to prove that they're working hard and getting things done. So when you get a new political position like that, like a board seat, you want to show the people, your chairman, that, yeah, you're glad I'm here because I'm actually going to be able to help you solve some problems. And the tendency, if you are overcompensating or you have issues, that you're bringing to the table, is that you're going to start, you come on the scene and you start rubbing people the wrong way at the outset because you start offering solutions before you even understand the problem. You haven't even learned the dynamics, the group dynamics of who's doing what, who thinks they're the queen bee, who, is the contrarian, who's the one really in charge, who gets stuff done, who's the person who's a problem. So you don't even know the lay of the land yet. You may not even know the company or product or industry you're in, at least not enough, and already you're coming in with suggestions, and I can guarantee those suggestions will be short-sighted, or they won't be relevant, or the worst, if you end up insulting the intelligence of the people you're giving advice to. Because odds are, if you're new to the field, what you think is insightful is just part of your learning curve. So to the other person who's already been there for 4, 5, 10 years, what you're thinking is kindergarten obvious stuff. So to say that to someone who's the expert in the room, someone you should be seeking leadership from, is actually quite insulting and a slap in their face. So I've been very successful on boards. Right now I'm doing my second term, as chair of our local marketing and economic development committee for a town. And I served a year before that, before they made me chair. And I've served on political electoral district associations boards as director of communications. And in those capacities, I turned what was a very, very anemic association into a target riding that became, the prom queen of Niagara. And that took me several years to do. That didn't happen overnight. That took many years to do, but I did it. And the reason I was in a position to be able to have that kind of impact was because I allowed myself the time to do it right. And that includes, for example, chairing our economic development committee in Annapolis Royal. For that, the first day or two that I was on the board, I don't think I said a word. And the first thing I do, so here's the first thing I do when I get on the board is before I start telling them what they need or what they should be doing, I learn, right? And I don't just learn about my job on the board. I don't just learn about the board in terms of its function and what it's trying to accomplish. And of course, learning what its limitations and its problems are. I also learn the personality dynamics of the people I'm working with and what their domain is, because usually, everybody has their specific talents or areas of interest, and they will take on like a subcommittee role, or, Susan's the one that plans all the special events usually, and Mary's the one that handles all the whatever, you know what I mean? So what you don't want to do is start stepping on toes. So you got to learn whose toes are in what pond, right? And learn who wants the support versus who's a micromanager that has things on lock. So when you come in and just start shooting your mouth off, stream of consciousness, whatever you're thinking, you can actually get yourself in a lot of hot water. And once you've made that bad impression, you've rubbed people the wrong way, odds are they don't give you another chance after that. Which means even if you are of value truly, as things go on and you learn, everything you say is going to rub them the wrong way, even if you're right. So you want to be really careful when you do that. So how you avoid that, let's go into solution-oriented mode, right? You want to spend a lot more time listening. So many times we just wait for our opportunity to respond. I'll give you another mistake I made very early in my career. I'm grateful I made these mistakes early, and now I'm old, so I had lots of time to fix it. But at the time, back then, I had this amazing idea for a customer, and I was so excited to tell them. And in our initial conversation, before I could even get my idea out, they said, I want to tell you what we're thinking. And what they were thinking did not really, my idea wouldn't fit that paradigm very well. But in my arrogance, I thought that my idea was so great that they would give up their thought, that they would think, wow, your idea is so awesome. And even though it's different from what we wanted, so we're just going to go with what you said because you're so brilliant, in my arrogance. And the idea was brilliant and it was great. The problem was it was such a deviation from what that guy was telling me that to him, I didn't hear, and he was right, I didn't really hear a word he said. That I came in there with a preconceived idea, and no matter what he was going to ask of me, that's what I was going to force down his throat. Which to him made me look like I was incapable of A, listening, and B, giving him what he wanted. So, and his response to me was, did you even hear a word I said? And I was humiliated. Now, I was lucky that I was able to recover quickly and say, you know what, I did. And to take your approach, these are some options we can pursue. I was very excited about this other idea because, and then I kind of, deviated. But if I was smart at the time, I would have truly sat there and listened to what he said. And I would have responded with the kind of thing he was interested in. And then I could have added, I also want to give you another option. It's different than what you've asked, but I do have another idea that's kind of outside the box. Can I share it with you before we lock down on these other three ideas that you asked for that I gave you? That would have got me a way better reaction. So my caution would be, before you speak, listen, and don't just listen for the moment that you can respond that affirms, your position on the outset. Listen with an open heart that maybe will make you change your idea or position. So really, really listen the way like I listen to a focus group. So when I'm listening to a focus group, I'm not going in wanting a certain outcome necessarily, right? When I'm listening to a focus group, I'm trying to glean pearls. I'm trying to glean nuggets that I can use to either craft a narrative or counter a thing, right? So when you're listening to a focus group, you're not going in defensive. You're going in like a sponge. And if you can have that sponge-like receptivity when you're in a group meeting or a board setting, and that includes studying the behavior of people, the interdynamics of people, who hates who loves who, you'll be able to navigate that opportunity in a way that's actually valuable to the group, because you'll be able to move through it a little better. And learn. Like, before you start telling people what they should be doing, learn. Maybe they're already doing it, and now you're just being, again, insulting, right? What, you saying we wouldn't have thought of that already? Like, come on, right? So you don't want to get that reaction. So learn and really make sure that the things that you see as gaps or as problems are really there before you point them out. And again, put everything through the filter of value. Before you open your mouth or before you send the communication, think to yourself, what's the nugget of value here? Am I saying this because I'm trying to prove something? Am I overcompensating? Or is this a big risk that I actually did find that's legitimate? Or is this something new and fresh and actually something that nobody's thought about that will be valuable? So always check that what you're offering is coming from a place of true contribution versus an ego overcompensation. And if you can get that level of self-awareness heightened, you can really achieve very good things. Because what you're doing is, when you're going in and you're really listening and you're really learning, they will see that, and there will be an appreciation that every time you come to the table, you've done homework, right? You've done your research, you know what you're talking about, and that you really listened to what your client or your partners or your coworkers are saying and feeling, and that you become the MVP, that you are so heightened in your awareness and in your knowledge, your confidence, your true confidence, that what you do bring to the table when you do open your mouth, it's valuable, it's concise, right? And it helps close the deal. And anything that deviates from that is likely problematic. So check yourself. So that would be the advice. That's your mini class today on how to be awesome on a new board, how to be valuable, and how to shine in front of your boss and impress them so that you can climb that ladder all the quicker. Go get them. If you have any questions, any subjects you'd like me to cover, please feel free to send me an email at Daniela@blackrammedia.com.